So good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous. My name is John Wishart, and I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. On behalf of the Chamber, its sponsors, together with our virtual bookseller, Tidewater Books, I'd like to welcome you to the very first launch event for the new book, Humanity at Work, Leading for Better Relationships and Results, written by Moncton's own Pierre Battah. So yes, you are attending a world premiere, so I hope everyone is safely in their homes wearing their red carpet best. Pierre will be joined this evening by Dr. Manju Verma and Tina Smith. Both women are among the many insightful people showcased in Pierre's book. We also have another special guest, the book's publisher and CEO of Lifetree Media, Maggie Langrick, who is joining us all the way this evening from Los Angeles, where I understand it's 38 degrees, but we're not jealous. I'm pleased that many chamber members have joined us for tonight's event. We're delighted to be joined by others who are part of Pierre's book project from Australia, the United States, and across Canada. Now, I had a look at the registration list this afternoon, and Pierre, you have attracted a star-studded audience. We have a Canadian Senator, Nancy Hartling. We have our MP, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor. And I counted no fewer than 7 people who are actually in your book. We're disappointed, obviously, not to be together in one place. But thanks to the virus, if I'm allowed to say that, we have folks from around the world with us this evening. So welcome to Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, one and all. Moncton is one of the safest places in our world right now. So when Pierre and I first discussed the format for tonight, we quickly agreed it should showcase some of the inspiring people from the book. We also wanted to be instructional with some practical takeaways for business people like our chamber members, and also have educational value for anyone who's joined us. Humanity at work is truly a universal theme, perhaps more important now than ever before. For our local audience members, Tidewater Books of Sackville, New Brunswick is the event's virtual bookseller. The link was on the original invitation that you received, and information is now available at www.tidewaterbooks.ca. Now, Tidewater Books owner Ellen Pickle and this evening's author Pierre have graciously offered for the books to be signed and personalized, and we're going to make them available for pickup here at our chamber office in Moncton. Tidewater will also happily ship books to people who reach out to them who may live farther afield. Notre format pour la soirée est le suivant. This is how tonight will unfold. Each of our guests will present for roughly 10 to 12 minutes, after which they will answer a few questions, which we hope will come from you and our audience. And yes, there might be a little bell that will sound or a note that will come up on screen, dear presenters, to urge you to wind it down so we can keep things moving along. Pour les participants, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction chat et tout moment durant le webinaire, et je pourrai poser vos questions à nos invités. Just type your question to any of our presenters via the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many as we can throughout the evening. We'll try to get to the gist of all the questions. So here's what you need to know about tonight's presenters. First off, of course, we have Pierre Battah, speaker, trainer, and author. Pierre is an award-winning leadership and workplace specialist. He speaks and trains across Canada and in the United States, and is a longtime workplace columnist for Radio-Canada CBC. He's a TEDx presenter, a former senior manager in HR, and was previously a management professor at Mount Allison University. Humanity at Work is Pierre's first book, and it says here those close to Pierre have threatened it may also be his last. And I believe I saw Gabrielle on the registration list, Pierre, so if she types something in the chat, I'll be sure to share it, okay, about the process. Also tonight we have Tina Smith of Wawanesa Mutual Insurance. Tina is back with us by popular demand, as she was a standout presenter at last year's Workforce 2020 Summit organized by the Chamber. She's extremely well positioned to share her practical HR advice for our current reality. Outside of her role with Wawanesa, Tina is an advocate of higher learning and continued educational pursuit in the fields of sociology and human resource management, as she is also an instructor at UNB's College of Extended Learning. Now, Tina thrives on helping employees and leaders build trusted relationships, developing partnerships, and building community networks through her common touch leadership style. She also has a wicked sense of humor. To start things off this evening, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Manju Verma, who together with her business partner, Jill Essen, recently launched an Atlantic Canada-focused company specializing in workplace inclusion and wellness called Engage to Engage. She'll be sharing her thoughts on how to make your workplace inhospitable to racism. Very topical. Dr. Verma has worked in the area of inclusion and anti-racism for over 30 years. She's also a certified conflict mediator, published author, and former professor of education at UNB. So without further ado, Manju, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay. Merci, Jean. Hello, bonjour à tous. Okay. First of all, I want to congratulate Pierre on this insightful book. Here it is. It was a really compelling read, Pierre, and I wanted to share that with you. What I love so much about it is that I was learning new things, but at the same time, it was in a context that I recognized. So it was like, oh, I know her, I know him, I want to know her. So it was like this great learning experience, but you served up this experience in, you know, a plate of New Brunswick expertise, and maritime expertise. So which said to me, hey, you don't need to go looking elsewhere for this talent. We have it here. So, you know, in some ways it was a real example of how to shop local. So one of the things that Pierre mentions about me in the book is that I'm an agitator. So I'm really going to try tonight to live up to that compliment, because I do see that as a compliment. So here is the first thing that I want to say to everyone. In the world of diversity and inclusion, we need some major changes right now. On doit avoir un changement dans le monde de la diversité. Il le faut. First of all, creating a diverse workplace, it's not enough, not anymore. It was at one time, but we really need to move on from that right now. Putting a bunch of different people in the same room and thinking that they'll somehow get to know each other, that hasn't really been a true success. And there's lots of reasons for that. Why? Because in most cases, when you put people of different backgrounds and different experiences, when you put them in a room and you make them communicate with each other without any structure, without any communication strategies, it usually doesn't work. The people who, you know, feel that they've made room for the new people, well, they're just waiting for something to happen that will justify a stereotype or justify a reason not to make change. So for example, let's say a company hires somebody, a person with a disability, and then one day that person is late, or they ask for an extension in a project. Often people who are not ready for change or who don't have the skills and the strategies for change, their response is, aha, I knew that was going to happen. See, we can't have this much diversity in our workplace. And the people who room is made for them, they are so worried about being seen as different, as somehow rocking the boat, as somehow undermining the system, that they don't say anything. And they try very hard to be invisible, or at least have their difference as invisible. I've spoken to lots of newcomers and immigrants and people that have been here a long time that purposely downplay very important events, like religious events, or very important personal events that happen to be particular to them because they don't want to stand out in the workplace. And this isn't an old story. Just yesterday, I was talking to a female colleague of mine, and she told me that she gets up every morning before the normal workday, so before 8 a.m. or 7 a.m., and purposely sends an email to one of her colleagues. It's an unnecessary email, but it's a purpose email because she wants them to think that she's working at this time. Why does she want them to think that? So that they don't notice that she's not answering emails between 8:15 and 8:30. That's the time that she walks her young child to the bus stop. When I asked her about this, she said, everyone I work with, their kids are grown up, or they didn't have to raise their children, you know, the mom did it and they didn't have to worry about that. And they don't understand that my child is scared to go to school. So I'd rather just, you know, kind of deflect that. So and she does it by appearing to be productive at another time. So really minimizing her difference. And that was yesterday. So we're not talking about the 70s or, you know, the 50s. What we do need to do right now is move into a world of inclusion. And that is so different from diversity. Pierre, you dedicate a large part of your book to psychological safety. And an inclusive workplace is a perfect example of a psychologically safe workplace. In an inclusive workplace, everyone gets a chance to talk. Everyone gets a chance to share their challenges, their expectations, their experiences, and their fears. Even the people who are worried that they're going to say something that they could have said 10 years ago, but somehow, you know, somebody's pointed out to them, or they've had one too many visits from HR, that you can't say this anymore. In an inclusive workplace, they get to be heard as well. And they get to have discussions on why saying certain thing or having a certain way of doing things is no longer appropriate. Worst case scenario, if you do not have an inclusive workplace, is it becomes a workplace of bullying, where people are demeaned for being different and people are expected to put up with it because they should be lucky to have this job or lucky to have this position. In an inclusive workplace, it's okay to say, I don't like what you just said, or I find what you just said inappropriate. In the same way that it's okay to say, I don't understand why that's appropriate. I don't understand that why what I said is stereotypical. And I don't understand what you mean when you talk about privilege. In an inclusive workplace, in a psychologically safe workplace, it's positive to say things like, I don't understand. So it's not only allowable, not only encouraged, but it's a positive thing to do because it leads to learning. An inclusive workplace permits the sharing of stories. And I think that's what it's all really about, is sharing our stories. In fact, you know, the definition of a stereotype is truly only knowing one story. And that's how we get stereotypes. So true leaders invite other stories. True leaders recognize that a person can come to the table with multiple stories. And Pierre, I have to say that, you know, you've done that tonight. You could have, you know, launched the book by yourself, spoken about it by yourself, but you didn't do that. Your book, which is a collection of stories, is, you know, being launched with you inviting others to share their stories. And I really appreciate that. Tina, your story about, you know, bringing Home Depot to New Brunswick. I mean, Pierre never says diversity and inclusion when he's talking about you doing that, but that's what it's really about. Your whole example is about context and knowing the context that you're going into. So for those of you that are out there, taking the time to share your stories, to encourage stories, it's actually going to make your workplace far more resilient. And I actually have an example of that. I have a story about that. So as you all know, most of us went home on Monday, March 16th. That includes the employees of several civil and federal departments, including ACOA. On March 17th, on Tuesday, ACOA HR put together a task force made up of agency-wide and region-wide employees. And their whole raison d'etre was to figure out the needs of their employees working from home. And there were people from all different jobs. And it didn't matter what your job was. Your whole purpose was to share information. And this ad hoc committee was in place by Friday. So people went home on Monday, and by Friday, there was something there to meet their needs. This ad hoc committee was able to bring diverse stories to the table. So people were worried about, how do you work from home if you've got young children? We had people worried about, how do you work from home? How do you stay home if you're home all by yourself? And we had people thinking about, how do you stay home and work from home if maybe home is not a safe place for you? And all of those people came to the table, and those stories were horizontal, not vertical in value. And from that, COA management was able to meet the needs of their staff staying at home in an extremely quick fashion, like within a week. Now, I don't know how many of you work for government, but I can tell you not a lot of things happen in a week. So it was quite stellar. And it really was about people sitting down and sharing their stories. There are some not so positive examples as well. I was at a workshop once where one of the participants said, you know what? All you have to do is be Aboriginal and be a woman, and bang, you work here for life. And there were 2 Aboriginal women in that workshop. I don't need to tell you, the damage that that was done there, especially since all these people worked together. In another example, it was actually me. I was in a workplace and I was new, and someone came up to me and said, oh, you must be the new Viz Min hire. And it made me think, what stories are being told in this workplace that someone thinks it's okay to say that? What stories are being told, in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, behind closed doors in management meetings, that somebody thinks it's okay to say that? We all tell stories. It's really important that we are careful about the stories we tell. One of my favorite authors, Thomas King, he's an Indigenous American Canadian author, that's his title. He says, we really need to be careful about the stories we tell, because once we tell them, they're out there. And as I said earlier, that's what stereotypes are. There are stories that have gone unchallenged. So in your workplace, I want to say to you, what are some of the stories that you tell? Are your stories one of inclusivity, of wanting to know about different things? Or are your stories about, this is the way we've done it and this is the way we've always done it? In order to create inhospitability to racism in your workplace, and that's a really hard word to say, pour moi, il y a 3 key choses. Protéger. Create a hospitable and mentally healthy workplace. L'inclusion. La diversité n'est pas assez. Vous avez besoin de l'inclusion. Give people the power to identify themselves and determine who they want to be. In the 30 years I've been working, I've been a visible minority, a person of color, a racialized person. I've had all sorts of names given to me. Let people define themselves. And finally, check yourself. My kids tell me that all the time. They're like, oh, Miss Employment Equity, you just said something that wasn't very cool. You need to check yourself. And that's true. We need all check ourselves, not people just on one side or another. I recently noticed all of the comments on Facebook about the lack of representation in the Emmys. And I thought, how many of us worry about the lack of representation in our schools, in our workplaces? Maybe those are the things we should be putting on our social media sites. So those are my 3 keys. Protect your employees, include them, and like I said, check yourself.
Thank you very much, Manju, for that. A lot packed into 10 to 12 minutes.
Yes, it was fast.
Yeah, I'd like to encourage everyone, if you'd like to pose a question, please, now's the time to use the chat function, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I have a first question here, Manju, from Jill, and she asks, what do you tell people who believe they are being discriminated against when an employer hires within those sort of 4 equity groups?
Okay, so that really goes back to being proactive. As I said, that doing that without talking to your staff, without explaining to your staff about the need to have a diverse workplace, an equitable workplace, doing that without it, that's your diverse workplace. That's where you're going to have conflicts. So the key to that is explaining why you're doing these things. In the past, we never explained. We didn't feel the need to explain if our whole staff was all men. It just happened. Unfortunately, as change happens, we have to explain that change. So the key to that is being proactive, talking to your team before you make these changes.
Next question is, depending on the size of the firm, where's the starting point for inclusion? And do you need outside expertise? Do you need to be a company that has an in-house HR department, or are there things that small operator can do?
Well, I guess as an owner of a consulting company, the smart answer would be yes, but no, you don't. You don't. You really need to inform yourself, and there are so many ways to do that. You know, today, whether it's through articles, whether it's through reading, whether it's through expanding your network and going to, you know, sessions like this, where you want to start. And it does not matter the size of your organization. Even if it's one person, two people, you want to start with awareness. And awareness can be things like just having these discussions, having people tell you about special events in their personal lives. You know, COVID's been great for that, because I have learned about the lives of my colleagues that I never knew before. I've had meetings with kids sitting on people's laps. You know, I've seen partners walk by with no pants on, which is, you know, that's not a great part of COVID. But, you know, we've seen each other in completely different ways. So getting that awareness. The next step is relevancy. Making all of this relevant to your employees. And an example of that was, you know, I was training correctional guards in prisons about being inclusive, and they were like, why does this matter to us? Their first priority is personal safety. So when I explained to them, listen, if you know about the history of Indigenous people and you know about the history of Black people in the Atlantic region, you're going to be safer because you're going to be able to connect with them better. So I was able to make that relevancy connection, which is personal safety. It wasn't actually about inclusion. And then finally, as you move up to commitment, what are some key things that you will commit to do to help fight oppression? And it can be, you know, any oppression that you feel personally connected to, or you want your business personally connected to.
Great, thanks very much, Manju. Before I have you introduce the next speaker, I just want to give a quick shout out to William, who tells us he's watching tonight from Ireland. So we've got another continent checked off.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so Manju, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I do want to do, like, I guess one more shout out to Pierre, and also a connection to Tina in this story, because Tina, when I read more about you, the more I got to, after our little meeting the other day, I wanted to know more about you because you were so interesting. And it made me think of a story that my dad used to actually tell me. And it's a myth. I'm pretty sure it's a myth, but it's a nice story nonetheless. It's about when the Persian refugees arrived on the shores of India. And when they arrived, they were met by a messenger of the king. And the messenger was holding a cup of tea. And he gave it to the leader of the refugees. And he said, "My king says India is like this cup of tea. It's full. There's no more room." The leader took the cup of tea, put in a spoon of sugar, stirred it until it dissolved, and he gave it back to the messenger. And he said, "Take this back to your king and tell him that we will be like the sugar in that tea. We won't take up any more room. We'll only sweeten what's already there." And that's what inclusion is. It doesn't take up any more room. It doesn't need to take up any funds, any room, any time. It just sweetens what's already there. And Pierre, that's what, to me, your book was, with lots of sugar. And Tina, your story about bringing in Home Depot, a story I love, by the way, was one of the sweetest stories as far as I was concerned.
Oh, well, thank you, Manju. I mean, your words really resonate with me because, you know, I believe most often our impactful actions are really things that we can fluidly incorporate within our daily routine. On n'a pas besoin de faire quelque chose d'extraordinaire pour laisser notre marque. So one of our really basic yet powerful tools that we all have in our workplace toolbox is the ability to listen. Now, some of you are better at listeners and better at listening than others, but we all have the capacity. Vous savez que écouter, c'est vraiment plus difficile qu'on ne le pense. Et c'est pas enseigné dans notre cadre de cours formal ou dans notre cadre de programme à l'Université de Moncton ni à l'Université de Nouveau-Brunswick. Mais d'écouter, c'est directement lié au succès de nos entreprises et même à notre succès. So listening is really a very key feature in building trusted relationships between employees and leaders. Now, speaking about trusted relationships, I try to be really supportive to my husband and his love of hockey and the many hours he spends not only watching the games, but the pre-games, the after-game commentary, reviewing player profiles, and you know where I'm going with this. It's just many hours. And when I watch sports with him, in particular hockey, I really annoy him because usually I'm on my laptop. That's not the annoying part. It's coming. But I comment on the coaches because I'm watching the coaches more than I'm actually watching the players on the ice. Oui, c'est vrai, j'ai quelques mots à dire sur les entraîneurs parce que je les trouve que c'est les plus intéressants. So I think coaches, you have to think about it, they're really stellar listeners. And they listen with their eyes, with their ears, and of course their gut. Because coaches spend as much time watching players on the bench as they do on the ice. Because the off-ice behavior of a player is just as important as when the blades hit the ice. Now, as we all know, some coaches have played in the NHL. A few have not. But the common thread that they all have to be effective coaches is they have a keen ability to observe and build trusted relationships with the players. Because let's face it, we all know that if the players don't like the coach will not be there much longer. Now, I, of course, believe that John Cooper, Tampa Bay's coach, may be around for a little bit longer, we can say. I think he's secured that one. But the fascinating story with John, well, he's John to me. Let's say John Cooper then. The fascinating story with John Cooper is he's not a great former hockey player, but he's a very, very good listener. And this is a skill that he honed through his time in law school. So if you don't know who John Cooper is, well, I'll just tell you right now. You can look him up, obviously, because we all have Google. But he coached the Tampa Bay to the 2020 Stanley Cup win. And he coached my hometown boy, Cedric Paquette, to his first Stanley Cup. So need I say more? But anyway, now building that relationship is a really tough one because when it comes to leaders and employees, as business leaders, we need to encourage our employees to participate and to really take action, essentially to skate. So whether you're doing your shift huddle at the beginning of a shift or your one-on-one meeting with your employees, you have to make them feel at ease, right? We need to have work and we need to make them feel that they can work freely and to express themselves. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, la plupart de nous, on travaille à la maison, on fait le télétravail et sur les plateaux ou les réseaux de Teams ou Zoom. So in today's world, many of us are working remotely, and that means that we're interacting through e-meeting platforms like Teams or Zoom. And as a business leader, keep in mind that you set the tone and you open your mic and turn on your camera first. You're the leader, okay? Now, some of our leaders, most of them at Wawanisa, they do travel quite a bit, but some of them don't have that national exposure or North American exposure. So what happens is that for them, Teams is a new world, right? Now, in one of our business units locally, we heard rumblings from employees that they were very upset and they were actually having a good chuckle at their leader because their leader was, well, for lack of better words, camera shy. And it made the employees uneasy because they couldn't see their leader. They could just hear the voice of God, as they say, right? The voice behind the black screen. So what happened is, much like the analogy with the sugar and the tea, I spent time with the leader, just basically simply taking a few minutes out of my day, and we would both go in teams, and it would give him a safe environment to go on to video mode, change his background, adjust the volume, adjust the view, and those little things put him at ease. And then in mid-April, he sent me, so this is a month after, approximately a month after we all started our télétravail, or working from home. He sent me a really wonderful thank you note via email, of course, and thank you for coaching him. Now, it didn't really resonate with me very much, but see, these small gestures, much like what Manju was talking about, the sugar in the tea. I took the time, I made the room in my agenda, but I didn't disrupt the workflow that I have, and I helped someone else. So I'll just tell you how the story basically continues for him, is that turning on the camera in his team meetings is now a mainstay. Now, I don't know if many of you are aware of this next gentleman that I'm going to speak about, but his name is Dr. Pierre Battah, and he's commonly known in the international coaching world as PK. C'est pas votre PK de les Canadiens ou les Devils de New Jersey. So it's not our PK from Canada. But Dr. Battah has been recently voted by the World Human Resource Congress, so quite a big shindig, as one of the world's top professional coaches. So Dr. Battah, or PK, urges business people, much like yourselves, to form really sustainable and viable partnerships with others, so both employees and colleagues, and this will help us ensure mutual growth. So we now know that we need to form these partnerships, and that's clear. To form a partnership, we need a dialogue, especially a dialogue where hopefully one person speaks and the other listens, and we will help build that trusted relationship between the employee and the employer. But the key thing here is, how do we keep that trusted relationship alive? And I mean, I don't think I need to remind anyone here on this forum this evening that you know, employee engagement equals productivity equals ching ching, right? There's no special recipe. And you can take all the leadership courses you want and read all of the books that you want. Well, maybe you might learn something from Pierre's book, right? But this is a simple equation. Listen to others, cultivate trust, and it will work magic with engagement and productivity rates. Now, we all have to admit it, that in this unsettling time of working from home, we understand that we may have some distractions, and we don't truly listen when we're distracted. So getting back to Teams or Zoom, your meetings, your leaders should be turning on their camera so the employees can see you. It's important that they see you, because that will engage them. You know, not the other way around. It's not important necessarily, well, it is important for you to see them, but they want to see you. Now, I don't know, you know, if your mother was like mine, but I'll give you a little hint of what she's like. She would say, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. Did your parents say that to you? Do you know why parents say that to children? They want their children to look at them because they believe that it enhances comprehension. So by saying, look at me when I'm talking to you, it demands focus. Now, I'm not endorsing that you go in tomorrow to a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting and say, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. Because I can tell you that that dance is an arduous one, and it's a slippery road. I watched my mother for years go through that dance with my sister. She's younger, so, you know, and my sister would sit there in front of my mother with a glazed over look. And I don't know if the technique worked or not, but or it was just maybe my sister wearing my mother down. But what we have to do is really take some time to focus. So instead of, you know, maybe when people come to you, whether it's in person or on a Teams meeting, take some time to listen to them, turn on your camera so they can see the whites of their eyes, as we say, that they have your undivided attention, and that you're not necessarily typing an email, because we can't hear the keys click, okay? We can hear the keys click in a meeting. But let's take focus to another level, because I want to ask you, what do good leaders do? Well, they focus on others, right? And to ensure that their employees are doing well, both physically and mentally, and being productive at work, and that the employees are being developed and celebrated. That's not just because it leads to employee engagement, but actually because it circles all the way back to keeping that trusted relationship alive. Now, if we were in a physical room this evening, I would ask you to look around and, you know, but since we're on Zoom, you can easily click the participant list and you can see those within our circle and how important it is to keep that trusted relationship alive with these individuals. Because really, this is the definition of the chamber, us coming together with focus. So as we gather here this evening to share ideas and to celebrate this book launch, we need to acknowledge that the power that we exude to make change with others in our workplace and in our community is very strong. And I don't want you to leave this event tonight thinking that you have to go out and change the world and, you know, create a rally or a demonstration in downtown Moncton, Riverview, or Dieppe this evening. But I would like you to rise up and push yourself a little further in your own growth and self-development and inspire others and inspire yourself. And I'm going to tell you a little something that, you know, as I complete my final year in my 40s, I want to challenge myself in ways that I really haven't been challenged before. So as I was having a conversation with my Uncle Bill, so shout out to Bay Roberts, Newfoundland, Labrador, he asked me if I'd gotten around to giving blood, because anything about Uncle Bill, if you know him, from Bay Roberts, he's given blood over 100 times in his lifetime. Well, you can guess where the story's going. And so this summer, I gave blood for the first time. And yes, at 49, I really did give blood for the first time. So you're probably sitting back and going, well, this is a trivial story. But I'm getting to the point here, and that in late July, I sat at my desk, crafting a deliberate message to my employees, asking something of them that I had yet to do myself, to give generously to the Canadian Blood Drive. So ask yourself, do you challenge or propose things to your employees that you have not or will not do yourself? So have you given blood or plasma? Have you participated in a United Way Day of Caring? Have you volunteered at a food bank? Have you volunteered at a community spring cleanup day? So pause before you send the next message to your employees, and then rise up and challenge yourself. Because if you cannot do what you're asking of them, why should they do that one thing, that one action? Vous n'êtes pas seulement chef d'équipe, mais vous faites partie de l'équipe. So you're never too great or too insignificant to listen, to focus, and to rise up and think of the future. Il faut commencer maintenant à penser à l'avenir, ou même pour définir l'avenir. So, you know, speaking of rising up and setting the example, I think Pierre gives us a very good demonstration of that in his own right by taking the time out of his life to write this book and to share it with us this evening. John?
Thank you very much, Tina. There were a couple of comments in the chat room saying that people were looking directly at you while you were presenting, okay? So they learn from their moms. We do have a couple of questions that I'd like to send your way at this point. The first one comes from Jody, and it's, what is one practical tip that business leaders can use to improve employee engagement, especially during these uncertain times?
Yeah, I think that since, you know, and Manju, she alluded to that mid-March was really a great turning point for all of us in business and in our families. And I think one thing that our members here this evening and also in business, make time to really provide your employees, your colleagues even, a clear, concise, fact-based communication. And hopefully, if you're not face-to-face with them because of social distancing and the COVID situation, and you're on Teams or Zoom, that they see you and they get that communication from you. So they're hearing it from you. It's very clear, it's very articulate. And even if you don't have a lot to share, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of what you're sharing. So I think clear communication paths is really very, very important in during these unsettling times.
And a quick follow-up question. You talked about the importance of listening, and I believe in the book, Pierre also talked about active listening, and that's something that I just learned recently. How do you practice good listening when you are working remotely from your teams?
Do I get a prize for answering that question? I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's a magic, formula or a recipe. But I think that practicing listening, you get better while you do it. Figuring out what works for your teams also. What kind of platform works best for you? And you can really gauge if someone's listening on, their level of productivity at work. So assess what they're doing, how they're doing it. Are you listening to them? Are they listening to you? It's a symbiotic relationship, really.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Tina. Before I throw it back to you to introduce our special guest, I just wanted to put in a plug in the chat room. Pauline Roy from the Université de Moncton mentioned that France Bergevin-Jean, who is the goaltending coach for the Tampa Bay Lightning, is also a goaltending coach and a player at UDM for the Aigle Bleu. So congrats.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I know you have a special guest to announce. And before I pass it back to you, I just want Pierre to know, because he's been sitting patiently, that Pierre, I've made an executive decision. We're going longer than an hour because I don't want you to limit your own talk. Okay, Tina.
Thank you, John. So for those of you who know me, you know that I'm a book lover and a huge fan of the written word. And I'm really thrilled to hand it over to Maggie Langrick, CEO and publisher of Lifetree Media. And now, for those of you who don't know, Lifetree Media is a small company with a big vision, and it began in Vancouver, Canada, and then expanded to Los Angeles. And Pierre shared with me that he chose Lifetree Media because his publisher, as his publisher, because Lifetree publishes books that help, heal, and inspire. And the other reason he told me that he chose Lifetree books or Lifetree Media was that, because of Maggie herself. So please join me in providing a warm welcome to Maggie from sunny California, publisher Maggie Langrick.
Oh, thank you so much, Tina. Well, yes, I am the publisher of this really wonderful book, Humanity at Work. And I'm just really, really pleased to be able to pop in here and join you all in celebrating its launch. So Tina mentioned briefly, our company, Lifetree Media, is dedicated to publishing nonfiction books that help, heal, and inspire. And that is as true for our business books as it is for the books that we publish on personal development, psychology, and wellness. I think in all of those categories, we are always really seeking out authors who share our mission to make the world a better place through shared wisdom. And Pierre is certainly one of those. I think that every author's value is a unique combination of what they know and who they are. And I know that Pierre lives by the values that he shares in this book because he brought his humanity to every interaction that he had with his publishing team. It was a real joy and a pleasure to work with him and to help bring this book into fruition. If you are lucky enough to know Pierre personally, you know him to be a person who is funny and warm and is sincerely coming from a desire to help. Above all, Pierre is genuine. He is in person who he is on the page. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book yet, you're in for some laughs as well as the insights. So that is really what I think what this book is like. It's a conversation with a trusted colleague, mentor, and dare I say, a friend. Someone who just knows what you're dealing with and wants to help. I personally have not had the pleasure of sitting down at a dinner table with Pierre, but I know for sure that if I did, and when I do, let's just say when all this madness is over, the conversation would flow, it would be open, it would be thought-provoking and entertaining, and it wouldn't end at dessert. I know this because as much as this book is chock full of colorful stories, it could easily have been twice as long. And I think that every time we sent the manuscript back to him for an edit, it came back longer, not shorter. So I don't want to take up any more time from the man of the hour, who we've all come here to hear from today. With that, I just want to say congratulations, Pierre, and thank you for sharing not just what you know, but who you are with us today.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. Maggie, are you a horse racing fan by any chance? I don't know that you are.
I'm not, but I can be for the purposes of your of whatever you're about to say.
Okay. So the essence of this is a little ticky from my son a few years ago invited me to go see a horse race in New York, and 100,000 people showed up to see this race. And sadly, 100,000 people then attempted to all leave at once. So out of that emanated a story that I told for quite some time, Maggie, and some of the people that are listening painfully probably heard the first iterations of this story. And it goes something to the tune that, 100,000 people are trying to leave, buses and trains for 10,000 people, bedlam ensues for hours on end. And then finally, my son and I, Alex and I, figure, okay, here's our chance. We go to the bus, and from far away, it looked like people were getting jostled. It was a zoo. There were hundreds of people trying to get into the bus, and people are pushing. And from the back, in your best New York accent, which I won't try to emulate, somebody said, "People, remember your humanity." So last Friday, Maggie, I'm at working with the great people here in Moncton at the Boys and Girls Club. A very special CEO, Monsef Lacroix, says to me, "Oh, it's great to see you. I haven't heard you since 2012. You told that great story about people remember your humanity." And then he held up my book and said, "I can see that you have a through." And I stopped him and I said, "I completely forgot about that story. It's been years. I haven't told it in a long time." And then I said, "Maggie came up with the title. I had nothing to do with it." So one of the things, Maggie, that as I begin my words here, folks, you got to know that as a writer, it's a great idea, I'm told, I'm a rookie, to work towards a title. So you come up with a title fairly soon. Maggie, I think you shared this with me, and you said you want to be able to write towards something. Well, we had a working title, and it was good. It wasn't great. Don Lonnie, my brilliant, long-suffering editor, and I, we worked towards this, and it was fine. And Donnie kept saying, "Look, the creative process, things will emerge. We'll just keep rolling with it." And then, sure enough, I think it's when you read the manuscript, and you came back with Humanity at Work. Now, you can't judge a book by its cover, so they say. I disagree. Everybody's raving about the cover, which is the actual cover design and the title. So folks, I may have been talking about humanity a long time ago, but it took Maggie to kind of synthesize that and pull it out for me. That Don kept reminding me that this creative process kind of moves us along. As much as I sort of thought I knew what the book was going to be about, but then I did interviews, right? So interviews with Terry and Kathy Malley, who are builders of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton and many other organizations, including their own business, Malley Industries. And we knew, it was the day after the presidential election in 2016, but then the conversation turns into asking hard questions and creating psychologically safe workplaces. Didn't expect that. Dawn Arnold, our mayor here, our first woman mayor in our city. I knew that Dawn was going to be inspiring when I met her and when I spoke to her. I knew darn well I hope she would talk about how she sees her role with young women and girls and role modeling. And she went there, but man, she went there by virtue of, it's about the work. It's about the hard work. You have to role model working hard. That was the message, and it was brilliant in terms of how it was presented. Gardner McDougall, maybe the winningest hockey coach, with all due respect to Mr. Cooper, Tina. Gardner McDougall is the winningest university hockey coach in this country, maybe on the planet. He tells this fabulous story about continuous improvement. Came out of nowhere. And now everybody who reads the Gardner story is talking to me about that continuous improvement piece. So I'm sharing this with you because I want everybody to know that Maggie brought this, the team brought this, Dawn brought this, and as I continued the work, everything starts to build. I thought writing a book was a solitary experience. It ain't. It's a whole darn village that gets to do this, right? And I quickly realized, all of a sudden, I'm writing about people like in chapter 1, Maura McKinnon. She had no idea. The other folks were interviewed. They at least knew I was going to write something. Maura opens her email one day and there's a story about her. And I think she was a bit embarrassed, maybe uncomfortable, and she didn't like the attention. But she agreed that teaching that lesson and helping me teach that lesson was meaningful. She had no idea. Reviewers, people who read the book with typos in it on a screen, for goodness sake, the endorsers who did the same thing. Dr. Tammy Carroll, Dr. Tammy Lynn Carroll, Dr. TLC, to me, read every bloody word and came back and asked those really hard questions, around the science. And then she kept saying, what's your take on things? We need your take. And it was brilliant. And moved from there to a long list of encouragers. Many of you are on this call. And I can't even begin to name them all, but I will name one chap. He passed away not so long ago, a dear friend, Michael R. LeBlanc. Michael was the fellow who helped me build the tent poles to the book. And for years, he would always say, so how's the book? And as well as a whole bunch of other CBC folks that I work with. So to all of those people, this accomplishment belongs to all of us. And I just wanted to mention that it's in this process that the message comes, that the lessons come, and so on. The other thing that kind of propelled the work forward that I'd like to talk to you about for a minute is the research. So clearly, you get to hang around research libraries, which was just fantastic when you could actually go to them about a couple of years ago. But the research moves the book forward as well. And that probably segues us nicely into what I want to talk about really quickly before we wrap this evening. It's this notion of, leading in troubled times and what that means. And I'm a huge fan of the Gallup folks, as some of you may know. They do amazing work. They've been polling through the pandemic. They helped us a generation ago understand what employees really need from their leaders. So here's 3 things that our folks, our colleagues, our teams, they need from us. And the thing is, it's the same as they always needed, sort of, but it's just the lights are shining brighter on us now. And I think both Manju and Tina did a great job of underlining that at this time, our leadership is in a bit of a fishbowl, and we need to be turning on our camera. So the first piece around that is just direction, right? Moi, j'ai eu le plaisir de travailler avec un individu appelé Mario Patnaud. Puis Mario, lui, c'était pas compliqué. Peu importe ce que tu lui proposais, il te demandait, as-tu un plan? Do you have a plan? That was his question to everything. Well, folks, what our folks need from us right now in these troubled times is direction. And that notion of having a plan, and it might only be a plan for today, it might only be a plan for this week, but our people really need to hear that from us, because a plan also allows us to signpost. And I think signposting is this process by where we can say, okay, here are the steps along the way. Signposting allows us to look behind and see from where we've come, and signposting allows us to look forward as well. I need to tell you the quick story of Maureen Hanley. I met Maureen at the Wallace McCain Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership. And that's a project of the University of New Brunswick. And Nancy Mathis, the brilliant leader of that program, puts entrepreneurs together and brings facilitators and teachers to help carry the work of Wallace McCain, the French fry folks, for those of you around the world. The McCains believe strongly in New Brunswick and in developing entrepreneurship. And when I saw Maureen Hanley, she shared me this great story. Chef Michael Smith at the Inn at Bay Fortune in Prince Edward Island. The Food Network, they've been shooting shows for the Food Network for years. So she was telling me about one specific shoot. It was not going well. It was an 8-week shoot. They were 6 weeks in. And in her words, they were beginning to turn on each other and they were going to kill each other. They were doing good work. It was moving forward, but it was getting really tough. And then they had the idea. They had a movie night 6 weeks into the 8-week shoot. And all they did is they went to get all of the film, the tape that they had shot, which the team had not seen. They all sat together for an evening and they looked at how far they had come. They signposted the past and they were able to say episode 1, 2, 3, 4. They celebrated those. And then they looked ahead and said, there's not that much further to go. So when our people need a plan, they need direction, they need signposting. It's one of those fundamental elements that enables us as leaders to meet employee needs at this specific time. The second thing that people really need from us right now is clarity about their role. It's really that simple. What do you expect from me? And can I please have the tools to do that? And could we recheck on that really frequently? Because things are fluid and weird and we came out of a crisis or we're still in one or whatever the case may be. So if your first piece is direction and a plan, the second one has to be about clarifying roles. And you know, I think of somebody who's in the book, Rachel Gagnon from Assumption Life. Rachel Gagnon est une personne très organisée, mais elle n'est pas naturellement organisée. Elle se force d'être organisée. On rentre dans son bureau, puis ça a l'air un site de contrôle de la NASA, hein, avec ses documents, puis avec ses écrans. Mais Rachel vous dirait que parce qu'elle est organisée, elle comprend très bien ce qu'on s'attend d'elle dans son rôle de vice-présidente. Elle peut se permettre d'être très claire de qu'est-ce qu'elle s'attend des autres. So Rachel's organizational skills, tools, and systems as a leader enables her to have a lot of clarity around the expectations that she has of others. Try this. Try becoming really geared towards weekly. Weekly looks like if I can't meet my team once a week, something's off. If I can't have a one-on-one with most of you this week, I probably have too many of you or too few of me, right? So there's some great evidence now that really shows us that leadership is weekly. That's kind of the framing for much of our work. So if I need to understand the nuance around my role and changes to my role and expectations, weekly makes sense. Try weekly, it'll help. The last piece I want to leave you with in terms of leading in troubled times above direction and a plan and role clarity and expectations is the notion of care. So in short, do you care? And can you communicate that? So when I think about caring for people's well-being from an employment perspective, man, that just dovetails right into what this book has been all about. The book, from the premise of the book is we need to be driving for results. Unless we do that and we hold high standards that delivers, we're irrelevant, we're immaterial, we will not survive. So all of this is about delivering and having high standards and producing results. But if we do that in a cavalier way, if we do it inappropriately, and if we understandably don't develop the healthy relationships to make that happen, it becomes really problematic. And we know that we are not gifted in both areas. We are not both gifted in leading healthy relationships and building those and driving for results. Typically, all of us are much stronger in one than the other, which means that we have some work to do. So this notion of care and well-being as a balance to our driving for results. Now, I got curious, well, what does well-being really mean? You know, like, I got to care for your well-being. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, a little digging. So the science is pretty clear on what well-being is. I think 98% of the world's psychologists and economists and other scientists agree that well-being is 5 things. Yeah. Well-being is health, physical and psychological. Well-being is your career. So as I care for you as an employee who contributes, it means that I care for the progression of your career after you leave us or while you're with us. It also means that I'm concerned about you as a social being. Work is social. We're seeing all of the challenges around that right now, as you know. But it's also about you being in a social context within your community. Well-being is your financial reality as well. I have to have some concern there and some care, especially many places around the world have had to make adjustments to how they pay their people and paying them less in order to keep them and all the kinds of things that we're having to do. And the last piece of caring is around community. So well-being is health, career, social, financial, and community. So there's a lot to talk about, right? In terms of, and there's some things in there, I agree, it's none of your business and you just want to make sure that people are well. But it is about asking questions. I love the fact that we've talked so much about listening, because I think what you need to try to do here is ask a lot of questions, right? So I think my answer to great listening is great questions. And here, try this question. Are you getting what you need? You can qualify it any way you want after that, right? But I mean, if I'm going to show that I care, and I care in those 5 areas, and I balance that off against driving for results, my ability to check in with people frequently to make sure that they're getting what they need, I think makes a huge difference. So I'm going to try to do, I've been doing this for everybody else and now I get to do it for myself. So here's the essence of what I've been chatting about for the last few minutes. John, I'm going to turn to you and ask you if there's a question or two that has come your way, and then I'll come back and give some books away and show some pretty flowers and do some other things.
Okay, Pierre, thank you very much. I wish we had a couple of hours with you. Maybe we could make this into a series, you know? Like, oh yeah, there's an idea. I do have a question here from Jennifer, who is from Ocala, Florida. So welcome, Jennifer. What is one really valuable lesson you learned while writing the book that surprised you? And I don't think the fact that writing a book is damn hard counts. So what else?
I think from the research is how contagious team leaders are. I think the evidence is overwhelming. If you want to focus on anything within your enterprise, focus on your leaders, because the 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 people that they lead, that is the most influence you will have, is through those team leaders. Organizations don't have cultures, teams have cultures. And if we're smart, we can align those teams and align the cultures so that they all kind of speak to the same thing. But I think the absolute contagion, in a non-COVID way, the contagion of leaders, and if the way they show up, if they're positive, their team might be. If they're not, their team probably won't be, right? So it's all of that. And the second piece, John, if I may, I would say, I used to think that great workplaces had happy people, happy, shiny people, and it's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, some workplaces can be really hard, but if I look forward to going there, because I get to solve hard problems with people who have my back and who I share values, and we make progress, we solve problems together, and that when it doesn't work right, we talk about it. We say hard things to each other, truthfully, appropriately, and respectfully. So I think the contagion of leaders with their teams, and that great workplaces are really more about hard problem solving and having a lot of candor in the workplace.
I've got one other question I want to throw your way, Pierre. Do we need to lead people differently today than we did 20 or 30 years ago? Is it more difficult to lead?
That's, I'm a recovering headhunter, as some of you might know, and I haven't headhunted in years, and I'm fine now. But and with all love and affection to my headhunting colleagues, we used to just get really terrified when a leadership candidate would say, and this was maybe truer a while ago, this is how I lead. I'm participative, or they would say, something. And clearly, I think maybe you got away with that a few years ago. You could kind of lean on a dominant style. Maybe you were more directive. Maybe you were more participative. Maybe you were very hands-off. And you could probably get away with that one approach. John, I think today you need to have all of those styles in your back pocket. I think really leadership is situational now. And I think it probably always has been, but I think we have more facility now to learn and teach the fact that people really need, as best they can, the ability to draw on any number of styles. And that's probably a little more exacting and demanding than it might have been some years ago.
Okay, thanks very much, Pierre. I think now it's the fun part. You mentioned something about maybe giving away a book or two. So.
Oh, yes. Okay. So thank you, John. A great lead in. So here's how this works. It is September 30th. If today is your birthday, please send us a chat with your information and how to get to you and how to reach you. You've just won a book. Now, if yesterday was your birthday, you might want to send the chat in, or maybe 2 days ago, or maybe even tomorrow or the next 2 days. If your birthday's in these next few days, why don't you send us a chat? We have some books. I'll sign some books in with your information and so on, and we'll get that to you. So, so there's my book giving piece. I'd like to close if I could. John, unless you have another question, can I close?
Well, yeah, actually we do. Tamal Rafi from Assumption had a good question, and I sometimes worry about this too. Is there a danger in over communicating to your team?
Yes, if you are not authentic, real, truthful, genuine, or intentional, you should probably stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of the corollary is, can I give somebody too much feedback? And the answer is not if it's true. So I think over communication, and it's interesting because Tama is a communications guy. I think I would be reluctant to believe. Now, I can be a bit of a pain, you know, I can overdo it, and I think that's probably a note. But I think, especially in change initiatives and leaders, that's all we do is basically bring about change. We're told that we under communicate ×7 when we lead change initiatives, right? So I think it's pretty hard to over communicate if we're being genuine and real and we're talking about the stuff that needs to be talked about.
Right. Okay, our friend William in Ireland is actually the first winner of the book. So postage may cost more than the book to get there, but anyway, that's the way we roll.
Okay.
And we'll keep an eye on the chat. I know you have some closing remarks that you'd like to make.
I do.
Here.
Yeah, I do. Folks, I'd like to leave you with a quick comment. I didn't tell you the whole story about Maureen Hanley. When Maureen Hanley, who shared the story about Chef Michael, this afternoon I went for a walk in my neighborhood. I don't walk very much because I got a bad knee, and today was a good day to go for a walk. And Maureen Hanley lives in Prince Edward Island. I met her at the end of my street in the weirdest of coincidences, and I told her, I'm going to be telling your story this evening. And she shared with me that she was on her way for cancer treatment, her last cancer treatment. Now, what are the odds that I would run into this woman? What are the odds that I would be talking about her this evening? And I just had to share that with everybody because I want to leave us on the note of positivity. Maureen is one of the most positive people I know. And I think that by talking about this, we are sending her love and energy in terms of what she's managing. I'm really afraid of Pollyanna optimists. They frighten me. They're the ones that say everything is fine. Don't you worry, it'll be easy. Now you see, Maggie Langrick is an unapologetic optimist, which is a very different thing. But I've seen her and many others, like you, I'm sure, realistic optimism is what we need right now more than ever before. Now, if you listen to Captain Crazy Pants in the US and his pals, they'll tell you how bad things are in the world. Well, you know what? The evidence doesn't support that. Steven Pinker from Harvard, Montreal's own, we as a civilization have never been healthier, happier, knowledgeable, and the list goes on, in spite of our temporary challenges with the pandemic. So I think the notion of realistic optimism as leaders is the unwavering belief that our teams can do it and reminding them they've done it before. And then being a realistic optimist as a leader means, let's talk about how hard this is going to be. Let's talk about the plan that we have to put in place. And let's talk about the steps that we're going to take. And let's recognize it's going to be hard, but we've got a track record, and I have faith in you as your leader. So I'd like to leave you with that notion of kind of realistic optimism. And I would dedicate all of that to Maureen that I, for some reason, bumped into earlier today. With that, A few quick thank yous, John, and then I'll turn it back over to you. The Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. Look, it ain't the chamber. It was the chamber, but it was John. It was John who asked me long ago if there was anything he could do to help with this. So John, thank you personally. Thank you to your staff. Xavier, who you've not seen, folks. Xavier Infantas is the kind of the magic behind this with other Natasha and other members of the staff. Thank you. John, you rightly so pointed out the partners that the chamber has. I'd like to point out one specific one, which is Brainworks, the marketing geniuses. They were helpful for my book. Debbie DeGroot, my publicist in Toronto. Ellen Pickle with tidewaterbooks.ca, tidewaterbooks.ca, folks. It would be a disservice if I didn't kind of repeat that Ellen will go to great lengths, as I will, to make sure that you get signed copies and all that kind of thing. So John, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but before I do, I would tell people about John Wishart, if I may, that, you know, there's a compliment that's often given to people that goes something like, he's the type of fella that would give you the shirt off his back. Well, I can attest to the fact that Wishart will not only give you the shirt off his back, but in a moment of need, he will remove his belt from his trousers with all the risk that that engenders and provide it to you if you are in such need. I was standing in front of 100 people about to give a speech with no belt, and this man came to my rescue, and John, I am forever grateful for that, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Pierre. I was just glad I had a seat for that hour, so I didn't have to keep hitching up my pants, but you pulled it off. So that's it, folks. It's been a great, engaging, educational hour and a bit. I also want to thank Manju, Tina, Maggie, and of course Pierre for sharing their insights. And Maggie, to your point, I have shared bread with Pierre, and he is just as engaging over a meal and a glass of wine as he is over a Zoom call. So hopefully you'll get a chance to do that as well. If you haven't picked up a copy of Pierre's book, I urge you to do so. Here it is, once again. It's an excellent blend of scholarly analysis, Pierre's own expertise gleaned from decades in the HR and leadership training field, and you'll recognize several New Brunswick business people in each chapter. I don't think I went a chapter without saying out loud, oh, there's Harry and Kathy Malley, there's Rochelle Gagnon, there's Maura McKinnon. So you can visit tidewaterbooks.ca or their website, of course. And supporting a local retailer like Tidewater is so important in these COVID times. So I urge you to support local, and that is my political chamber statement for the night. Thanks again for joining us. Best wishes on effective leading to everyone. Encore une fois, merci de voir participer ce soir. Passez une bonne soirée. Thanks and have a great evening.